And joining us for this week's Political Roundtable are Delegate James King, a Republican of Anne Arundel County, and Delegate Tom Hucker, a Democrat from Montgomery County. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I thought everybody got a 4-week vacation after the session ended. We're back hard at work.
Still not catching up. Not quite.
Most of this program we've been focused on the Chesapeake Bay for MPT's Chesapeake Bay Week. From a legislative standpoint, is there anything, and from potentially a partisan standpoint, is there anything we should be doing differently?
Well, I think, you know, it's a priority to all the legislators that we take care of the Chesapeake Bay, but Maryland can't act alone. We need cooperation from the other states, and I think we've done a good job. We've passed some good measures, and we've worked hard, but 50% of the water that flows into the Chesapeake Bay, the fresh water, comes from the Susquehanna River. And that river flows through some of the heaviest farmlands in Delaware and upstate New York, where the nitrogen's coming in, and they wake up every morning with fresh water, and we end up here in Maryland having to deal with it. So I think it's important that we focus on it, but I think we need to bring some other states in and get some collaboration to fix this problem.
Well, nobody's against bringing more states in, but the fact is we're more affected by the Chesapeake Bay than any other state. We're more dependent on, our economy is more dependent on it, and the other states, because of that, look to us as leaders, and in fact we're falling behind on a lot of the measures. We have made steady progress legislatively in the last several years. We've passed a number of major bills to clean up the Bay. The trouble is we're not acting aggressively enough, and we're not acting fast enough. The Bay has a D on the report card. We really need the federal government, Jim's right, to do more and to get more collaboration between the states. But at the same time, we operate in a very hostile environment for the environment and for the Bay in Annapolis. There's too many special interests who have a real interest in keeping the Bay the way it is.
But you wouldn't find anybody in the legislature to stand up and say that we've done enough and Chesapeake is the way it's always going to be, and we should put our money elsewhere. So what are the special interests preventing?
You're right. There's a lot of happy talk about what we're doing for the environment. There's not nearly enough action given the results that we're getting. There are very hardworking environmental advocates down there every day banging away on all of us. But they're outspent and outgunned every day by the development interests, by the agricultural interests, and especially by the Maryland Association of Counties. That iron triangle of special interests really limits our ability to pass strong environmental legislation that most Marylanders want to see us pass.
I couldn't disagree. I disagree with that, and I tell you, I think there's very strong lobby in Annapolis for the environment, and I think there should be. But if you want to talk about the development community, the housing market, the bill that was just passed, the Nitrogen Reduction Act, that comes at a cost of $12,000 per homeowner to upgrade that septic system at a time where the homeowner doesn't have the money. The development community, the housing market, revenue comes into the state from housing, from development. Those revenues are down 20% right now. We've just pushed another measure that's going to lower those dollars coming into the state. And it's great to fix the Bay. We all want to fix the Bay, but we can't do it at any cost. And we can't take the attitude of just because a bill has a tagline that says environment on it, we should all support it and not worry what it costs. We have some very tough financial times in the state of Maryland right now, and it's incumbent upon the legislators to make sure we're passing sound policy and not bankrupting the residents of the state any further than they already are.
Jeff, if you think about it, wouldn't you, if the only goal was to protect the Bay, you wouldn't let anybody put fertilizer down anywhere? Right? But sure, we're not doing that.
It depends on the type of fertilizer. But what Jim's talking about in that septics bill is a very modest bill that only affected about 600 households that are, one, in the critical area, so they're within 1,000 feet of the Bay or its tidal waterways, and two, have a failing septic system. So in most cases, these are folks who built a McMansion on the waterfront to satisfy their ego. Now they have a failing septic system, and they want to be able to dump raw sewage into the Bay, untreated. Think about it, if my furnace breaks down or my roof leaks, I have to pay for it myself. What we did for these folks is we said you have to get a new septic system. In most cases, the state will pay most of the cost of that. They get grants from the Bay Fund to pay for the cost of a state-of-the-art septic system. I voted for that bill because it's good for the environment and makes sense, and Jim voted against it.
I did, and I'll tell you why. If you listen to the comments that were just made, if you just built a McMansion on the water, you don't have a failing septic system. You just put a brand new one in. The failing septic systems are for homes that have been there for 30 or 40 years. These are small lots. These are people who do not have $12,000. These are people that are going to be forced out of their homes for McMansions to be built. If you're going to force people to pay these dollars, they're going to circumvent the law. They're going to get septic companies to come in and do what's called Saturday jobs, where they don't pull permits. The guys come in, they dig a new hole in the ground, they run a new pipe, and we're going to add more nitrogen to the bay. If we're going to do these projects, we need to do it in a thoughtful manner and make sure we're not pushing people away from the law. If there's all this money that's stored in these funds, we made a big mistake a couple years ago. How did all these millions of dollars get into these funds to help people put new septic systems in? Shouldn't those dollars that we have taken from the taxpayer of Maryland gone to been helping the Bay? If they're sitting in some fund to be there to be spent, why haven't those funds been spent yet on saving the Bay? I don't think those dollars exist.
Of course, that was Governor Ehrlich's bill you're talking about.
But let me make sure I understand the septic system.
Sure.
So if you're not connected to the public sewer,
correct, and you live in the critical area,
and you have an old septic system that's not working for whatever reason, if you just replace it with a standard off-the-shelf
it doesn't
system,
remove nitrogen.
That's not good enough.
It's not good enough. We're saying you need to put in a system that removes nitrogen, and what's better, we'll give you up to $10,000 on the average in a grant from MDE to do that. And what Jim's saying is not true. I'm on the committee that passed this bill, and I'm sure Jim isn't as familiar with it. The fact is, we put language into the bill to allow MDE to consider the fiscal cost to the family and their financial need in giving out these grants. In most cases, the state will pay for the entire cost of the new septic system.
I'm down to a couple minutes.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's ridiculous to think that the state's going to come out of pocket for all these homes that need new septic systems. On paper, it sounds great. On reality, it's not going to happen. The reality of the situation is the nitrogen that flows into the bay, over 50% of it comes from agriculture. It doesn't come from humans. It comes from cows. If the liberals in Annapolis could tax the cows, they would, but right now they can't, so they have to tax the human beings. The nitrogen flowing into the bay is coming from agriculture. Let's address that problem.
All right, let me talk about, I mentioned at the top of the show that the head of Homeland Security is talking about potentially repealing the Real ID Act, which does require the states to make sure that people who get driver's licenses are in the country legally. Huge topic in the legislative session. So if the feds are talking about repealing it, was all that for naught, and should the governor veto the bill?
I don't think he's going to veto the bill. I talked to the governor's office today when I saw that topic come up. The fact is, it sounds like the Homeland Security Secretary Napolitano, was reacting to a draft proposal that the National Governors Association is kicking around. They certainly might amend different parts of the Real ID Act that was passed by Congress. I don't think they're going to repeal that lawful presence. And in any case, I can't see the governor repealing a hard-fought product of the legislature under the understanding that we have a federal mandate, without the federal government clearly acting, saying we don't need to comply with that.
Nobody was happy with that hard-fought product of the legislature on either side.
We all feel like we got a gun to our head the federal government put there, and that we have to comply with this federal mandate. Now, in fact, if the feds make clear there's no federal mandate, you know, we could come back and change the law, but I can't imagine him vetoing it at this time.
Are you happy with the bill?
I'm not happy with the bill. I actually co-sponsored the original form of the bill. It was amended several times to a version that I wasn't happy with. I voted against it, but I don't think the governor is going to veto the bill. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that a Maryland driver's license is valid to fly in a plane, get in a government installation, a military installation. Without the law coming through right now and complying with Real ID, our residents aren't going to be able to participate in those types of events. So we need to have the law in the books. It's not the best law. I didn't like the law, but we need to have something in place to comply with federal Real ID, because I think the federal government may take months or years to sort this out.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Delegates Hucker and King, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.